First of all, let me talk a little bit about how I perceive comedy. Don't give me that look.
This should be educational.
Oh, God. Okay. Comedy, there is nothing more serious than comedy. There isn't. I'm sorry, it is the highest...
serious business.
It is the most serious art form there is. It is, with the exception of, playing the piano or like something that is complex like that with hand movements and stuff like that, or composing or something like that requires... Comedy is the distillation of human nature. Who we are and why we laugh at ourselves.
This is getting really deep, isn't it?
This is what happens when you watch films like this shit. This is as good as comedy gets. You're not going to have people getting hit in the head with a plank, okay? It's not that sort of comedy. There's a little bit of slapstick put in there for dense people, but this was... Let me set the scene. In Soviet Russia in 1953, they had like 30 years that is the Second World War, the Great Patriotic War go through. Everybody is paranoid as fuck. The fear that permeates through this film is just delicious. Some people would not describe it as such, but for the sake of comedy, you've got to have something that's terribly wrong to be laughed at, and it doesn't get wronger than 1953 the Soviet Union. It's like this political. There've been millions of people die, and then suddenly the dictator drops dead, and nobody's in charge. And it is just the most delicious comedy, all subtlety. I'm going to watch it again. I've watched it 3 times this week. 3 times this week I've watched it. And each time I've sat and I've watched it, I've heard another joke. Because the main jokes, there's levels on this film that is exquisite. It's going to get a high score, I'm sorry, but it is just exquisite how much effort they put. Some of the jokes I didn't even pick up on the first 2 times through, but they're just said as like they just fly back off the shoulder like a Parthian shot. Really good stuff.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now, you asked me.
What do you think of it, Pip?
I thought it was really crap.
Oh no!
I just thought the way it ran, the way the characters were all connected with each other, I thought was just rubbish.
Wow. And I've just spent the last 10 minutes waffling on about
I know,
how
I'm
awesome
sitting here just going,
You're not going to like this, Paul.
The woman playing piano, Maria, she has they have her up so much at the start to have her only having tiny bits, and they start forming a relationship with her, and Nikita, but then nothing goes with it.
Yep.
So they start making up all these little bits, and it doesn't go anywhere. So for me, it was just all over the shop.
Yep.
And I just thought, wow, this is really... I mean, there were parts of it that were slightly interesting. Like watching as soon as... what's his name? Oh, my gosh. Is it Bera? What do they call that guy?
The fat guy who's the monster.
Yes. As he immediately goes into action, I thought, this is going to be really interesting. But then, he just lets people walk over him, and I just thought, well, I don't know. To me, it just was a bit weird, and I found Jeffrey Tambor's character a bit weird too. Melenkov.
Yes, the guy who's in charge.
Who's supposed to be in charge.
Who's a completely weak person and only got there because he is a complete and consummate coward. That's part of the comedy.
But he could have been killed like in the first thing. And then Michael Palin's character, and I love Michael Palin. I think Michael Palin is awesome.
Yes, and he plays a twit.
No, but it didn't make sense. There was no backup for why is he so upset with what's his wife's name, and and just there's a few extra little bits of the scenes that I thought they don't even make sense. They're just saying this off the bat here and there, and it just was a bit all over the shop for me. And I thought it was just too...
Can I ask how many times you watched it? Twice. You watched it twice.
I watched it twice.
Did I?
Hence why, but between watches, I actually went and read up who these people were, what happened, and then I actually got more upset the second time round.
Because it wasn't paying off for you.
Well, because they said that the bear was actually doing all these things, and then he just got copied by Nikita, and then they said, you know, basically they were just all trying to copy each other.
Yep.
And I thought, well, they're making this guy look like he's a rapist, but in history it was probably not even the case. And I thought, well, hang on. And also Michael Palin's character, you know, so history for me didn't make... So reading the history part of it then made the second watching even more annoying.
Yep.
So... But,
I'm upset...
I'm sorry.
No, hear me out. I'm upset that I've put up a film that you really, really found hard work and didn't like.
I gave it 2 watchings and I made sure I didn't listen to history first.
You've done everything right. You've done it. It's okay. It's fine. I'm upset because obviously. Can I ask then? How do you find your comedy? Like what's funny to you? Because it's all subjective. It's like music. It's like some people like jazz and everybody else knows that it's crap.
Well, my favourite movie, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, I thought that was funny.
Right. So you like a dark humour.
Not necessarily. I mean...
They had people rolling down the stairs. I just found that... every time I watched it, I pissed myself laughing when I saw that guy being pushed down the stairs, and when they were talking, you just heard the occasional gunshot. And when that guy got shot in the head after he'd done all the effort of putting everybody else in the trucks and sending him away from the dasher, and then the other guy just shot him in the head... Every time it gets me, and I just rapturous laughter. But that's because I'm broken as a human being, I think.
No, but...
As opposed to a normal person.
I could see they were trying to be funny in this film.
Yes.
And there were parts of it that you could have a giggle, like the what's his name? Jason Isaacs' character, Zukov. He was funny. The guy with the scar who was in charge of it.
But he's slapstick. No. He's so close to being slapstick. He's
I'll just take him out the back and
that's
shoot
right.
him.
He's the closest thing to slapstick in the film. So, because everything else is all words, and it's all...
But to me, all the words didn't make sense. They didn't link.
It's almost like a Bollywood comedy.
No, but if it had been linked properly, it could have been funny. But to me, it wasn't linked well enough to make it funny.
Yep.
I could see where they're trying to be funny, but to me it wasn't as...
Okay.
Where his character I found genuinely funny.
Now, look, I understand... I understand why I find it funny, as I said, because I'm a bit of a broken human being. And a normal person might look at it, and it makes me concerned now because I think that other people... So, I shall put this caveat in. If you find yourself... agreeing with Pip more often than you agree with me, don't go watch this movie. You won't enjoy it.
There's some great actors in there,
they're all
some
good.
Great talent in there.
Fantastic.
It's just...
But if you find yourself agreeing with Pip, it's probably a good chance. No, hang on. Let me take this out to the end.
Yep.
If you don't like... If you think I tend to waffle on and I sound like I'm just full of shit... Don't watch the film. It's fine. It's okay. You don't have to watch it. But for those people who have got gallows humour, who like finding funny in places where it should not be funny, and everybody else is looking at them, if they're the person who bursts into laughter in the middle of a funeral because they just thought of something at that time, that person, if you're that person, go watch this film. You will love it. Okay? Because this is as dark as it gets. This is as awkward as it gets. This is as socially inept as it gets.
There were parts of it I found funny, like when the son of this guy has said, "Oh yeah, my dad's up there," and he's playing chess with his mum, and his dad walks in, and she's, "Oh, I'm glad you're back," and he's just...
But they're all horrible people.
No, but
every goddamn last one of them.
Ones where the relationships were obvious.
Yes.
And people's goals were obvious and what was happening, etc. was obvious. Those parts were funny. Like the guy who was the conductor that they had to get in his pyjamas. But I mean,
yes.
that was funny because it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to come and kill us. Say whatever you have to. And they go open the door and say, could you come and conduct this? And he goes, oh, Yes, of course, definitely.
Yeah, because he thought he was going to be taken out and shot.
That's what I mean.
You know?
There's little aspects that are funny because
Yes.
you could see
Yes.
what the character's drive
Yes.
is. But most of it, I had no idea what they were sort of all doing and wanting. And to me,
I've
that
said
just
this
lost
before
it.
to you, and you have looked at me and raised an eyebrow or two. And when I've said things like, context is everything.
But
And
even,
in this
no,
film,
even
context is everything.
even reading history and then watching it again,
Yes.
it wasn't quite true. Which I know everyone's doing their own artistic
Sure.
interpretation, but
A lot of people, though, will read the history of it. They might look at it, read a web page in Wikipedia and stuff like that. I mean, when it comes to this kind of history, I have wallowed in it. I have rolled around in the mud. I am completely comfortable
so
with
maybe
it.
this movie's for history buff people.
I think, more than that. I think it's for people who are a little broken. Okay? Maybe this is a bad film. I don't know. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And it's just going to be one of those. And look, if you don't enjoy this film and you think it's bad and it's badly put together, I want you to be truthful. Don't be put off by me giving it a high score or anything like that. Punish the fuck out of this film. Because that's integrity. That's where you come from.
Oh, hey, I'm
You're
not
ready
gonna hold back.
You're ready to give it the 2 that it richly deserves. I get that. I'm going to give it the 9 that it richly deserves.
So you give it a 9?
I give it a 9. I give it a 9, and that is my hill.
Okay.
Yes.
I will give it, I don't know, 3.
Yep.
I'll give it a 3.
No, it sounded like you were going to give it a 3. That's why I was going for 2, because it sounded like you genuinely hated it.
I wanted to like it because I saw the characters in it and I went, oh, I know all these people. I like what they do and
Funnily
I'm so
enough-
ready for it.
Funnily enough, this was not a film I was trying to punish you with. That's the
is that
humorous
still
thing
coming?
about it. It's still coming. Oh, don't worry. Saviour is yet to come. Yeah. How I sometimes come away with these little stories, that little footnotes for the movies. There is a footnote. I was listening to a podcast probably about 6 months ago, so the details will be a little loose, and so please forgive me, people. But I was listening to the person who actually directed the film, and they had
Armando Iannucci.
I'll take your word for it.
Is that, if I pronounce it?
No.
Who knows?
Again, I will take your word for it.
I mean, I've seen him do, like, he does radio programs. He did, what's that one that Steve Coogan does? Oh, Andy Partridge.
Yes, Alan Partridge.
Alan Partridge, sorry,
Yeah.
thank you.
I heard it as Alan Partridge from, yes. But he took this movie, because most of it was actually filmed in Kiev and Moscow, except for all the internal rooms. Because I'm getting used to it. Now, see, this is we slightly. You may disagree with us, listeners, but we are slightly getting a little bit more focused on what we're doing here in this. But
Except for maybe tonight.
Well, I am. I don't know about you. That's my punishment for not liking my movie. My beautiful movie. But yeah, it was mainly done in Kiev and Moscow itself.
The external parts,
Yes.
yeah.
And the caveat for this is that they took it, once it was all put together and all the editing and everything, it was the finished product. They took it back over to Moscow in 2017. Is it the 2017 film? And they had one viewing of it in Moscow, in Putin's Russia of today. Okay, now you can imagine, you got a feel for what it was like with Stalin in command, sort of thing, in 1953. The equivalent of who the KGB were, they came and they watched it, and it had one viewing. It was shut down after that.
I can imagine.
Yes.
That would have been
And that was sent
interesting.
packing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. And maybe that's why I'm a little bit more sympathetic to this film, because it's truth to power, and I always like that. So I think it's a relevant film for the way the world is going at the moment, and there are lessons to be extracted from it that I like. Yes, I know, but I'm the political extremist as opposed to Pip, who is more
fluffy bunnies and rainbows.
the fluffy bunny and